Have you ever wondered what kind of life a person must have lived to choose silence over society, to wake each day not to voices, but to wind? There was once a man who chose that life. In the dense embrace of an ancient forest, where sunlight barely filtered through the towering trees, and the songs of birds echoed through the shadows, there lived a man who had abandoned the world of men. His name was Ewan, and his story was carved not from the earth he now walked upon, but from the pain that had driven him to this place of solitude. Ewan had once been a man of quiet strength and simplicity. Born and raised in a small town on the outskirts of the city, he worked as a carpenter, crafting wooden furniture with skilled hands that shaped beauty from raw timber. His life was humble but filled with love, for he shared it with Clara, his wife, and his daughter Lily. Clara was the light that guided him through the struggles of life, while little Lily was his world, an innocent soul who filled their home with laughter and joy. They lived in a small cottage with a garden blooming with wildflowers, where Lily would chase butterflies and Ewan would carve wooden toys for her. But fate is often cruel to those who love deeply. On a rainy evening, as Ewan drove his family home from a weekend visit to Clara's parents, the road was slick and treacherous. A speeding truck lost control, colliding head-on with their car. When Ewan awoke in a hospital bed days later, he was told that Clara and Lily had not survived. The world that once held beauty and love became a desolate and empty place. He tried to endure, tried to live among people who offered him empty words of comfort, but the weight of his grief was too heavy. He felt suffocated by the world and its noise. So one night, without telling a soul, Ewan packed a small bag and walked away from civilization, disappearing into the wilderness where no one could find him. The forest was vast and unforgiving. The towering trees loomed over him like ancient guardians, and the creatures of the night whispered through the darkness. Ewan had no experience in survival. He stumbled through the underbrush, his clothes torn by thorns, and his body weakened by hunger. There were nights when the cold seeped into his bones, and he lay shivering on the damp earth, clutching the small wooden pendant he had carved for Lily. His tears mixed with the rain as he whispered her name, longing to hear her laughter once more. The forest tested him relentlessly. He drank from muddy streams, foraged bitter roots, and often went days without food. At times he thought of giving up, of surrendering to the wilderness, and letting nature claim him. But something deep within him, a primal instinct to survive, refused to let go. He began to observe the creatures of the forest, learning from their ways. He crafted spears from sharpened branches and fashioned nets from vines to catch fish in the river. Slowly, he adapted. He built a small shack from fallen logs and dried leaves, enough to shield himself from the rain and wind. Over time, Ewan's hands, once skilled in carving wood, learned to shape tools from stone and bone. He tracked deer through the undergrowth, set traps for rabbits, and fished in the river with patience and precision. His body grew lean and strong from labor, and his senses became sharp. He could hear the distant crack of a twig, smell the earth before rain, and read the tracks of animals that passed through the forest. When the rainy season came, Ewan built a sturdier shelter with walls reinforced by clay and a roof thatched with leaves. He collected rainwater in hollowed logs and fashioned a fire pit from stone. As the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the trees, he would cook his catch and warm himself during cold nights. He began to tame the wild goats that roamed the hills, building pens to keep them safe from predators. In time, he raised chickens from eggs he found abandoned in the underbrush. The forest, once his enemy, became his ally. Yet even in the peace of the forest, Ewan could not escape the ghosts of his past. On quiet nights, As the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the trees, he would see Clara's smile and hear Lily's laughter echoing through his mind. He carved wooden figures from fallen branches, shaping them into tiny animals and dolls, gifts he once made for Lily. He placed them on a small altar near his shelter, where he would sit and talk to them as if his family still listened. "Lily, I caught a fish today. It was a big one," he would whisper to the wooden doll that bore his daughter's likeness. "Clara, you'd laugh if you saw me chasing a goat through the forest," he'd say with a smile that quickly faded into tears. As the years passed, Ewan became more than a man surviving in the wilderness. He became part of the forest itself, a silent guardian who walked with the wind and knew the rhythm of the earth. He cultivated small patches of wild vegetables and herbs, built fences from woven branches, and raised goats for milk and chickens for eggs. He became a skilled fisherman and hunter, respecting the life he took to sustain his own. Though loneliness never left him, he found peace in the simplicity of existence. The forest healed him in ways the world never could. One day, while wandering deep into the forest, Ewan stumbled upon the edge of a cliff that overlooked the vast green wilderness. The wind brushed against his face as he looked out at the endless horizon. For the first time in years, he felt something other than sorrow. He felt gratitude for the forest that had embraced him when the world had cast him out, gratitude for the memories that still lived within him, and gratitude for the strength that had allowed him to survive. Ewan knew he would never return to the world of men, nor did he wish to. Here, in the forgotten forest, he had found something far more precious than civilization. He found himself. The years passed like the seasons, and Ewan grew older, his hair streaked with silver, his face weathered by time and hardship. Yet there was a quiet strength in his eyes, a wisdom that only solitude and survival could forge. The forest, once his prison, had become his home, his refuge, his world. But even in the deepest wilderness, time never stands still. One evening, as Ewan sat by his fire, roasting a fresh-caught fish, he heard something unusual, a sound that did not belong to the forest. It was the crunch of footsteps, deliberate yet hesitant, moving through the underbrush. His instincts sharpened. He grabbed his spear and stepped into the shadows, blending into the trees as he had learned to do over the years. Peering through the foliage, he saw a young boy, no older than 10, standing at the edge of the clearing. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with something foreign, something he had not felt in a long time. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt, and his eyes wide with fear. The boy did not see Ewan at first. He stumbled forward, collapsing onto the ground in exhaustion. Ewan stepped out of the shadows, his voice hoarse from years of disuse. "You're lost," he said simply. The boy looked up, startled, but too weak to run. My village. Raiders came," the boy stammered between ragged breaths. They took my mother. I ran for days." His voice broke. Ewan felt a pang deep in his chest, an old wound reopening. He knew the pain of losing everything. He knew the loneliness of having nowhere to go. For the first time in years, he was faced with a choice: to remain the ghost of the forest or to let another soul into his world. "Come," he said. The boy hesitated, then took it. Ewan nursed the boy back to health, feeding him broth made from boiled roots and roasted meat from his hunts. He learned the boy's name was Kai, and slowly the silence of the forest was broken by conversation. At first, Kai was weak, unaccustomed to the ways of the wild. He flinched at every animal sound, struggled to light a fire, and barely knew how to hold a spear. At night, they sat by the fire, and for the first time in years, Ewan spoke of his past. He told Kai about the world he had left behind, about the family he had loved and lost, about the pain that had driven him to the forest. Kai listened, wide-eyed, and for the first time, Ewan felt something he had long forgotten. Months passed, and Kai grew stronger, more skilled. He smiled more, laughed even, sounds Ewan had not heard in years. Then one day, as they hunted by the river, they heard voices, human voices. Ewan froze. He had spent so long avoiding civilization that the sound felt almost unnatural. He motioned for Kai to hide and crept forward. Beyond the trees, he saw them, a small group of survivors from Kai's village, ragged and weary, searching for their lost child. Ewan turned to Kai. The boy's face was filled with hope and hesitation. He had found a home with Ewan, but his mother, his real family, was out there. "You should go," Ewan said quietly. Kai's eyes filled with tears. "Come with me." Ewan shook his head. "The world is not mine anymore, but you belong with them." Kai hesitated, then threw his arms around Ewan, holding him tightly. Ewan, for the first time in years, embraced another human being. "Thank you," Kai whispered, and then he was gone. Ewan watched from the trees. As Kai reunited with his people, he saw the relief on his mother's face, the joy in the eyes of those who had thought him lost. And then, as silently as he had appeared, Ewan turned and disappeared back into the forest. Over the years, travelers spoke of the ghost of the wilds, a man who lived beyond the reach of civilization, a guardian of the lost. Some claimed he had once been a man of the city, while others believed he had always belonged to the forest. Ewan never sought the world again, but sometimes he would stand at the edge of the river and wonder about the boy he had saved, about the life he might have had if fate had been kinder. Yet he did not regret his path. Years passed in the forgotten forest, and Ewan grew older. His body, once hardened by survival, began to betray him. The aches in his bones grew sharper, his hands trembled when he tried to hold a spear, and his breath came shorter after each hunt. The forest remained the same, unchanging, eternal, but Ewan was not. He felt it in his limbs, in the cold that seeped into his very marrow when winter came. He had always known that death would find him here, far from the world of men, but he had never imagined how cruel it would be. One autumn morning, while tracking a deer deep in the woods, Ewan misjudged a step. His foot slipped on damp leaves, and he tumbled down a rocky slope, his body colliding against jagged stones. A sharp pain shot through his side. As he felt something snap, he lay there, gasping, staring up at the towering trees above. His breath was ragged, his vision blurred. When he pressed a hand to his side, he felt warm blood seeping through his tattered clothing. For the first time in decades, he felt fear. With gritted teeth, he dragged himself upright, every movement sending a fresh wave of pain through his ribs. He knew he had to return to his shelter before nightfall. The forest was no place for weakness, and the creatures that lurked in the darkness did not pity the wounded. Ewan made it back to his hut just as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting the world into twilight. His breath was shallow, his strength fading. He collapsed by the fire pit, struggling to light a flame with shaking hands. The warmth helped, but only slightly. Days passed, and the wound festered. His body, once resilient, could no longer fight the infection that crept through his blood like poison. The goats bleated hungrily outside their pen, but Ewan had no strength to feed them. The chickens pecked at the earth, their coop falling into disrepair. The world around him carried on, indifferent to his suffering. He tried to heal himself, chewed bitter herbs, wrapped his wound with whatever cloth he had left, but nothing worked. His body was rotting while he still breathed, and the loneliness, it was worse than the pain. He had lived alone for so long, convinced that he needed no one, but now, as he lay on the cold earth, too weak to stand, he longed for a voice, a touch, anything to remind him that he was not just a ghost waiting to fade. He thought of Clara, of Lily, of the warmth of their embrace. He whispered their names in the darkness, but only the wind answered him. One morning Ewan awoke to snowfall. The forest was blanketed in white, silent and still. He knew this would be his last winter. With what little strength he had left, he crawled out of his shelter, dragging himself to the river where he had fished for years. The water, once so full of life, was now frozen over, a reflection of the death creeping through his veins. He sat there, leaning against a fallen tree, watching the sky shift from gray to pale blue. His breath came slower now, his heart struggling to beat. The forest had given him everything: food, shelter, purpose, and now it would take him back. As the first light of dawn touched his face, Ewan closed his eyes, and the hermit of the forgotten forest became part of the earth he had called home.